Hey guys, it's Miss Jordan. I'm coming to y'all from my office today, and we're going to continue talking about the fruits of the Spirit. So, if you guys remember, a fruit of the Spirit is not something that we do on our own, but something that the Holy Spirit produces in us because we have a relationship with Jesus. So the ones that we've learned about already are love, joy, peace, and this week we're learning about patience. Now, if you're like me, patience isn't a word that you get really excited about, but it's something that I think is so important for us to learn. All throughout the Bible, people that didn't have patience ended up not having things go so well for them. So on Sunday, we talked about two different stories. One is from Luke 15 and one is from Luke 4. The story in Luke 15 is when Jesus told a parable called the parable of the Prodigal Son. Now in this, he tells us of a boy who goes to his father and he tells his father that he wants his inheritance right then. Now if you know what inheritance means, it means something that you get whenever your parents pass away or something that you get whenever your parents die. And so he went to his father and he basically told his father, "Dad, I don't care about you. I just want your stuff. I just want your money," and that's it. His dad went ahead and gave it to him, and then the boy left. And whenever he did, he didn't make good choices at all, and he ended up losing everything that he had, to the point that he was working for a guy feeding pigs, and he looked at what the pigs were eating and decided that it looked really good. That's a really low point to be at. So he decided to go back to his dad, and we all know the story, or a lot of us do, about how his dad accepted him back in, and we want to focus on that part of the story and say how God's like that, and whenever we wander off and make bad choices, he's always there to welcome us back with open arms, and he loves us, and that is very true. But I want us to focus on patience in this story. The son eventually was going to get his father's inheritance. That's something that was gonna be meant for him, but he wasn't patient about it. He wanted it right then instead of waiting for the right timing or whenever his father passed on to get it from him. If he would have waited, he might have learned the things that he needed to, like how to conduct business or how to actually be good with his money. But because he wanted to take things out of the right timing, he wasn't good with his money, and he didn't know a lot, and he was young, and he lost everything that he had. So another story that we talked about was in Luke chapter 4. And in Luke chapter 4, Jesus had just been baptized, and then he goes off into the wilderness. And whenever he goes off in the wilderness, Satan decides to tempt him. Now, Jesus hadn't eaten anything for 40 days and 40 nights, okay? So a whole 40 days he hadn't eaten a single thing. So Jesus must have been really, really hungry. So Satan goes to him and he says, "If you are the Son of Man, take this stone right here and turn it into a loaf of bread." Now, could Jesus have done that? Absolutely he could have. We know he did a lot of miracles after that, like feeding 5,000 people with just a little sack lunch of some little boy, right? So Jesus could have done that if he wanted to, but he didn't. He told him man does not live on bread alone. He knew if he listened to him and fell into temptation, he would be going against his father, and he knew he needed his father more than he needed bread. Then Satan comes to him and he tells him that he was going to give him all of these kingdoms if he just would worship him. And did Jesus do it? No, he didn't. Eventually, would Jesus have all the kingdoms of the whole world? Yes. In Revelations, it says every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So we know one day Jesus is going to have all of those things. Satan was just tempting him to take them out of the right timing. And lastly, Satan takes him up onto the very, very top of the temple, and he says to Jesus, "If you really are the Son of Man, if you really are the Son of God, throw yourself off of here, because it is written that the angels will lift you up." Now, up until that point, did everybody know that Jesus was the Son of God? No. A lot of people called him a liar, a lot of people called him crazy. They didn't recognize who he really was. And so it might have been tempting for Jesus to actually be seen as the Son of God. But it wasn't his time yet, and he told him, and he rebuked him, and then Satan left him. So here's the contrast of the two stories. In one story, Jesus, he realized that he was going to get these things in the right timing, and he didn't want to have them without God involved and without the perfect timing for him to have those things. And the other story, the boy didn't care about the relationship he had with his father. He didn't care about making sure that he had things in the right time, and he just wanted them when he wanted them. So there's a whole contrast here between Jesus and the prodigal son that we can look at and see that sometimes the way that we're tempted the most is not with things that we will never have. We're not tempted by things that we will never get, but by things that we will get. We're just tempted to take them out of the right time. For example, if somebody put a piece of candy on the table and they told you, "Here, this piece of candy's for you, but you're just gonna have to wait until I get back to eat it," and you're sitting there and you're staring at it, it's gonna be really hard for you not to eat it because you want it right then. But if you sat there and you waited and you didn't eat it, and when they came back they brought you another one for waiting? Or what if when they came back you got to sit there and you got to eat it together and enjoy talking to them? Or what if when they came back and they realized that you ate it without being allowed to, they got upset about it? There's consequences for whenever we try to do things when the timing's not right. So in class we watched this video. And in this video, this little boy obviously is not very good at being patient. He's cooking with his grandma, and his grandma's trying to make him cookies. In another video, she's making him a cake, and he just wants everything right then. He wants all the ingredients. He wants to eat the butter, he wants to eat the brown sugar, he tries to eat baking soda, which is nasty. He's just taking everything before it's time. And because of this, whenever we think about a cake has to have very specific ingredients. So if he eats half a stick of butter, if he eats a handful of brown sugar, if he eats all the baking soda, do you think at the end, the cake or the cookies, whichever one his grandma's making, do you think that they're gonna actually taste good? No, they probably won't, because they're missing some things that they need. So sometimes God is like this little boy's grandma. He's trying to make us something, and it's gonna be so good, and it's gonna be for us. But because we don't want to be patient, we start taking things when it's not time to. And because of that, we have consequences, and maybe it's not going to taste us good whenever we finally get the thing that God has for us. Then on Wednesday night, we talked about a guy named Noah. Now, besides Jesus, I think Noah might have been the most patient person in the Bible, and this is why. We still have monkeys. Yeah, that's right. We still have monkeys. And that's why I think Noah is the most patient person in the Bible. Noah was on this boat, or on this ark, with all of these animals screaming and screeching, and it was noisy for so many days. It rained 40 days and 40 nights, and then after that, they had to wait for the floodwaters to go back down so they could get off the boat. So they were on this boat for a long time, maybe like 100 days. And imagine trying to sleep whenever all you're hearing is this. Yeah, I would have been throwing some of those animals overboard. I love animals myself, but at a certain point in time, you get to the point where you just don't have any patience at all, and you're like, either I'm jumping overboard or they're going overboard, one of the two. But we still have monkeys, which makes me think Noah had a lot of patience. Besides that fact, though, when God first told Noah that there was going to be a flood, Noah was 500 years old, which is pretty old. But by the time that the rains actually happened and the flood started, Noah was 600. That's pretty crazy. It took 100 years for him to build this ark, and he waited and he trusted in God, even when people came to him and said, isn't that crazy man that's building something he calls an ark that he says he's gonna put all these animals on because it's supposed to flood, whatever that means. But Noah kept on trusting God while he was waiting. And while we are being patient and while we're waiting on things from God, what we need to be doing is we need to be continuing to do what God has told us to do. We need to be continuing to worship God, to follow God, to stand for the right things, and to be the person that God has called us to be. So that whenever the time comes, whenever we're about to have the thing that God has for us, we're prepared for it. And right now, in this day and age, we are the most impatient people that we will ever meet. If you think about how people used to live before 2020, it was a lot different. For one, whenever I was growing up, we had something called dial-up internet, okay? And if you don't know what dial-up internet is, ask your mom and dad. It was really annoying. Sometimes you had to wait 20 to 40 minutes just to get the internet to load, and it was this little running guy that you had to wait for. And then you would kick it on, and you could talk to your friends on AOL Messenger or something, which you thought was super cool. But if somebody was trying to call your house and someone else was on the internet, you couldn't do both at once. It was crazy. Nowadays, if our YouTube video that we're trying to watch on mom or dad's phone doesn't load really fast, we get frustrated with it, and we're sitting there tapping it. We're like, come on, like it's not loading. But we don't realize that video, it has to go from a satellite up to space to another satellite and then come back down. We're expecting it to get back from space in less than half of a second, and if it takes 5 seconds, we get upset about it. That's how impatient we are. We live in a day and age where microwaves are the thing. If I can't microwave my Tostino pizza rolls, like I'm not gonna wait and make something. And I can say that for myself too, because I don't cook very often. But also, traveling is one. In the 1800s, if you had to go from here to New York, you would go on wagon trains, right? And we've talked about these in the past, about how the whole time to get there, it would have been long and slow, and you had to stop at night because you couldn't travel without headlights. Nowadays, we take a flight, we watch a movie, which we didn't have movies on planes when I was growing up, and we get to New York in like 3 hours. Before, that would have been, people would have died along the way. If someone was pregnant before you started your trip, they would have already had their baby by the time you got there. It was a long, long, long trip. So back then, people were so much better than we are at waiting. Nowadays, we can't just sit and be still. I have a friend of mine that told me the other day they couldn't have imagined a world where music wasn't something you could listen to in your earphones all the time. But if you think about it, that actually existed. not that long ago, where people couldn't just sit there and listen to music no matter where they were. So people before us had to be okay with silence. They had to be okay with waiting longer on things and working more towards things than we do. We're in a time of instant gratification, and that's a big word for saying we get what we want when we want it and we don't wait for it. So let's fight back against this. Let's fight back against everything that society has tried to make us into. And let's be people that are okay with waiting for things. Let's try to practice waiting. Let's just try to see if we can become better at being patient with people. That can be being patient with people that are in our family, or being patient with people that are in front of us whenever we're on the way to school and they're going really slow. That's something I have a hard time with, because I don't think the people that go 20 under the speed limit should be legally allowed to do that. But we have to be okay with realizing that things don't always come in our timing, and we need to trust God that He will bring things about when things are right. One thing that really helps us to be patient is to have hope. This is something that helps Noah to be patient, because he had hope that God was going to bring something out for him. He listened to God's instruction because he had hope that God was going to save his family. So this week, think about what is something that you're hoping for, and how can that help you to be patient. I love y'all so much. Jesus loves you even more. There's nothing you can do about either one of them. Practice patience this week, and I hope y'all have a great weekend. Bye, guys.